that was at a time when I was living in Atlantic City, New Jersey, in the Navy there during the Korean War, and being interested in small airplanes. Also, I saw an Aeronca LB for sale, which is a low-wing Aeronca and very rare, and it was cheap enough for me. So it was up in upstate New York. I don't remember the town it was from, and I decided to buy it if it looked all right. So I drove up. Somebody, I don't know who now, carried me up there driving, and arranged to have an appointment to meet the owner and if it was okay to buy it, and got there, and the owner wasn't there, and he had sent a representative though, and I said, well, are you going to explain the airplane to me? I wasn't familiar with the airplane, so I want somebody to at least point out the details of it. And so he said, yeah, that was my job, I'll do that. And so we walked around the airplane in a typical poor pre-flight method, and he showed me what he knew, which wasn't very much. All those airplanes are pretty simple. There was a cover plate down by the pilot's left knee position, a little bit lower on the side wall of the cabin, and it said fuel on it. And I looking at that, I realized the airplane had two fuel tanks, one in each wing, and a header tank in the fuselage ahead of the instrument panel, and that it had like a cub. It had a wire indicator and a float in the header tank to tell it was full, but the ones in the wing had a cap on the wing but no gauge. And so I thought that ought to be something to look at, and so I asked this guy what that was and what to do with it and everything, and he said, I don't know. I said, I've flown in the airplane with my friend, but I never saw anything happen to that. So he didn't know. So I took the cover off and looked, and there was a vertical fuel line in there that had a valve on it, that the handle was lined up with the down way of the fuel line that came down the side of the fuselage. Obviously the top went to the header tank and the bottom went into the wings somehow, one of the wings. And so another part of the fuel system that was obvious was a wobble pump, just a hand pump to move the fuel. It was on the right side down there. And so I kind of put all that together and figured out that you had to pump the fuel from the wing tanks into that header tank when you needed it, but it was full. All the tanks were full. We'd take the caps off and look there, so all the tanks full. So I started for home. I didn't know exactly how much was in it. Didn't have any data on the airplane. And along the way, ran into pretty good weather, but a very strong headwind. And this header tank wire started going down, and I was looking at that in the distance on the chart on home and started getting pretty worried. And so I took that cover off of this valve and looked at it and said, well, the way it is must not be getting fuel to the tank feeding at this moment. That's going down. So where can that valve go? It wasn't labeled whether it's off, on, or left or right or anything. And so I said, where could it be? Well, it could be up, and that would be good, or it could be either left or right. So I turned it to the up position, figuring that was the more logical, and waited a little bit, and that gauge in the tank, the header tank kept on going down. So I said, well, that's not it. So I turned it to the right, and the gauge kept going down, and I turned it to the left, the gauge kept going down. And I said, well, I can't do anything with that. I don't know how to do it. And so I watched the gauge and my chart and the distance from home for a few minutes, and about that time the thing ran out of fuel from that header tank. And so there was a very strong west wind, and I was about a couple of thousand feet, so I had no problem except picking the place it was going to land. So I looked down, and this was in New Jersey then, and the Garden State where they have lots of nice big open fields. And I looked down and picked the field, and it looked pretty good to me, plenty good. So I headed for that, and as I turned by it and turned downwind and turned back into it, all of a sudden that headwind started slowing me down more than I figured. I just made a judgment error, there's no doubt about it. And that field kept sinking below the nose, above the nose, I mean, because I was getting low of it on the approach. I was not going to reach it. And it was pretty obvious by the time I got down to 1,000 feet I was not going to reach that field. But there was another field just short of it, which looked just as good to me. It was open, but I thought by looking at it, it looked like it just recently been plowed and smooth. So it'd probably be thin dust or loose soil, you know. I didn't want to land in that, but it looked like flat. There wouldn't be any obstructions. So I just landed straight ahead, and it was smooth as could be, and rolled out. And went over to the next field, looked where I was aiming, and it was a terrible field. It was a vineyard, actually, and they had conical holes dug every, like plants, regular plants, through it about every 10 or 15 feet. There was a hole dug down about 5 feet, and a big 4x4 wood thing right in the middle of it. So if I landed in there, I'd sure torn up the airplane. But so the wind was fortunate, and I was lucky again, but I was sitting there with no fuel in the tank, the engine not running now, what to do? And about that time, the owner of the field showed up in a coveralls and a hoe in his hand, said, was kind enough, you got a problem? I said, yeah. And so while he's talking and I'm talking, I'm looking at this valve down there, and I figured out what I needed to do was get that valve in a different position and work that wobble pump to move the fuel. It wouldn't move by itself. I guess I thought it was engine driven or something, but it wasn't at all. And so I turned that valve and pumped that a little bit, and I heard fuel running that tank. I said, well, no problem. Now I can get fuel in there all I want, because the wing tanks were full. So I pumped it up, had a tank, plenty of fuel, and then told this farmer I was ready to take off. And I had plenty of room in that big field, so there was no problem. Didn't have to move the airplane or anything. And I had to get him to hold the brakes for me while I propped the airplane myself, which wasn't any trouble.
And what was growing in the field?
Huh?
What was growing in the field, do you know? What was growing?
Well, he's just now fixing to tell me.
Okay.
and I was going to get him to sit there and hold the brakes, and then he started talking and said, well, you see where you landed here, look behind the airplane. And I rolled over quite a few rows of, he said, our tomato plants had just been planted last week. And they all stand up there. And he said, you've damaged or destroyed quite a few tomato plants. And I said, well, I haven't got hardly any money. I got a little bit. He said, well, how much you got? And I said, well, how much are tomato plants? And I think he said 7 cents a piece or something like that. I quickly multiplied that out. He said, oh, there's several hundred. And I said, well, here's all I got. I got my billfold out, and I think I had $7. And I counted all that up and said, this isn't going to cover it, but this is all I got. I'll be glad to send you some more if you'll give me an address and so forth. But he said, well, give me the $7. That's good enough. And I said, okay. And I said, he got him to hold the brakes, and I cranked it up, getting ready to get in the airplane, and told him goodbye and thank you and everything, because he was been pretty friendly. And I didn't say a word. I was standing there thinking, I'm fixing to take off, go through another 700 plants. And he hadn't thought of that, or maybe he realized I hadn't got any more money, so it don't make a difference. I don't know. But anyhow, there wasn't anything to do then, so I just got in and firewalled it and took off without any problem and flew on home. And he didn't give me his name or address, didn't want me to send him money, so that was the end of that. But that was just a good luck and bad luck story all the way through. But that was the beginning of my experience with that airplane, which I enjoyed very much. One other thing about that airplane was worth noting. When I got home, I hadn't noticed it at all when we did this pre-flight around, which wasn't very thorough, as I've said. The tail wheel seemed a little low in air pressure, so I got to checking and finally had to take the tail wheel off because I couldn't find the valve stem to put air in it. Took the tail wheel off and got the tire off the wheel, and there was no air in the tire. It wasn't flat, it was just no air in it. It had rags, nothing but rags stuffed in it to fill it out and force it out to shape, halfway shape of a wheel. No. I never saw anybody do that before, but I guess it was okay because it got that far. But I got a tube then and put it in it, and it was better for me from then on.